Helping someone get hired doesn't necessarily mean they're going to pay you, and it also doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be able to keep the job you help them get hired into. My YouTube channel describes that I've been a software engineer, and I also want other engineers to exist with competency. I have a playlist titled Coding Sessions on my YouTube channel, and it's about 24 hours long. Hiring managers are being flooded with AI and want to relate to a human, and it is physically impossible for you to put your humanity into every single job application. If you're going to be applying to hundreds or dozens or thousands of roles, it really depends on your stamina. You might be able to imagine that you physically cannot put your entire being meaningfully into thousands of applications. You can have social media profiles and you can mention your social media profiles in applications. And hiring managers may or may not click through to actually see that you've been doing whatever you've been doing consistently. So recruiters are necessary, and that structure is changing. One of the best jobs that I've had, I worked at for about 2 years. It was for a company that sells music instruments, and I got that job through a tech talent agency. I would recommend the person who helped me get that job, and I would need to have a conversation with you before I recommend that you meet them. Yesterday was RPG Wednesday, which is a day that I make available for that kind of coordination. There are structures that are more helpful for describing specific people at specific times, and not everyone has been interested in developing those structures. In order to advocate for you, I need to care about the reasons why you would get hired. So sometimes it can be frustrating when I put the care into a space and the actions that are easily describable don't happen. Even making these videos can be exhausting because I need to describe a shape that an audience can become more familiar with, and the contexts that I can make these kinds of videos, and the different things that people tend to fixate on, and what I can possibly do about that can be frustrating to navigate. I don't want to have the frustrating bits override the message of this video. And also, I want tech companies to hire authors to tell stories that can make code flows. What is this? Control flow through code? Control flow is the thing that happens when code runs. And sometimes that can be very abstract, and we can go through a lot of different functions without actually being able to relate to the reasons why they exist. Especially with AI generated code, sometimes the code bases aren't very human relatable, and the amount of attention we allocate towards them might be physically inappropriate, like not the shape of a human's emotions. Sometimes it is not appropriate to try to empathize with a code base. Empathize, ooh, there's language about mechanical sympathy that I can probably find. The point is, there are new reasons to build human structures to make it easier for software engineers to be successful. I've been working on Book Talk for a few years, and that's why. Tech companies can hire authors to make control flow easier to reason about. Something to mind is that very good metaphors often become convincing realities, and we have seen how AI models can interact with some portions of the public sphere. It's worth minding, and we are in a new era. Cheers. My pens are out of ink, and I haven't gone to the store in 3 weeks because I haven't been able to afford the Uber, and I also don't have money. I'd need $40 to have money, which is the kind of broke that I am. I would need $40 to be break even zero. So I'm offering a deal. I don't want to be misleading, and cutting my prices sends a signal across industries that everyone should cut their prices. Only people who can afford to cut their prices can afford to cut their prices, so I'm not going to do that. But I am going to start doing some work. I am going to start doing some specific work, and you can buy into that work. And if you do, I'll tailor it more to you. And eventually, it'll reach a certain amount of value, and then you can cash that in by paying me for the rest of it. This is kind of like a pay as you go plan, but I'm going to start in advance and do the marketing ahead of time. So at least my audience will know that I'm putting effort into design, and the design will be familiar to them by the time that your project is released. Hire me for web development. Cheers. The software engineering interview is designed to be more difficult than software engineering as a job. If you can get hired as a software engineer, you have skills that can be useful for starting your own business. So the question is, why don't more software engineers start their own business? And the answer is it requires marketing, and a lot of the people who like code don't also enjoy being the face of a product. An unfortunate happenstance, an unfortunate occurrence, phenomenon that happens in companies is that sometimes companies hire people who don't actually care about the product that they're selling. And when these people are responsible for making hiring decisions, sometimes they hire people who also don't care about the product that they're selling. And that makes it more difficult to make the kinds of decisions at scale that can make the product easier to sell. Selling a product isn't necessarily caring for the people who are going to buy the product. And consumers are more sensitive to what they're being sold. So now, in order to have a successful business, you need to care about the person who's going to interact with your product and also care about the product you're selling. It's pretty rare to find a software engineer who is okay with being the face of a product and also cares about the product and also cares about the person who's going to buy the product. Sometimes an agency can describe that they are willing to adopt an amount of care towards some specific goal. Sometimes consultants can describe that they can adopt this care. My major in college was learning and education studies with a concentration in applied learning science. And I'm interested in making brands learnable because that's a description of my skills. Cheers! If you're a software engineer who can read code, there's an audience who will appreciate you reading code like it's hard sci-fi. You might not be an author, but there are on-ramps and off-ramps that you can think of like arguments and return values. If you've seen Disney Channel or Nickelodeon, you can imagine I'm not sure what they're called, like the segments between shows, like they are a meaningful chunk of onboarding. They can introduce you to characters and describe the aesthetic. You can do that by reading your code on a live stream. Cheers! There are at least dozens of people who mostly watch my videos because they like the way that I express my thoughts or the sound of my voice. And the reason that I don't improvise more entertaining content is I start to get kind of pissed off. Not gonna lie, this is an exhausting job and it doesn't pay very well, and sometimes people just tax my energy when I go live. So I appreciate having relationships with people who write books and tell stories because I can read their stories and maintain an amount of energy. Between videos, I go through a cup of coffee, or I need to take a shower or walk around and read something. So I can market your book, and you might wonder why I haven't demonstrated that more. And the reason is probably because I have, and the way the algorithms work can be frustrating. I'm planning on going live later today and reading through some educational psychology papers. Then I'll read through some software, I'll read through the code and make sure I can update it. You can visit my website, and I know a lot of people haven't. The opportunity has been available, and sometimes people visit the site and then immediately stop looking through it. You can also ask your language model to describe the site in a more interesting way. I don't mind. You can ask your language model to tell a story about my website. I spend time with authors who also have access to language models, and it helps to have a perspective. It helps to have a reason to care about language and a reason to care about the words that we're placing onto a page. If you're an author, hire me to market your book. If you're a reader, you might want to join a live and meet some of the authors who join as well. Cheers. One of the reasons that I got into tech was because my father has worked in tech. He used to work for a pretty large franchise. I'm not sure if it would be called a franchise, a multinational company, and he has known executives. And that was the context that I grew up in. And, well, it's hard to talk about for some reason. And sometimes when he hears me talking about it, he does things to specifically make it more difficult for me to talk about it. Just a lot of wounds related to the tech industry. And I don't blame him for the feeling of that because I have been rejected by tech companies against their best interest. So I know sometimes it can be very frustrating to navigate tech politics. But also, it's the context of why I spent so much time developing skill. And the financial stress of when he started his own business is the reason that I put so much effort into actually getting the skills right. And I actually do believe that my father's businesses were good ideas. And when they became particularly difficult because of limited resources, like the number of people who he could employ, there were pivots, which also makes sense. And my attempts to be there through, well, my attempts to be there for him through those processes were met with an idea that I should be shielded from the process, I believe, and the work that I did was never really integrated. So I got hired into tech and continued working towards that and continued being rejected from that acceptance. And that has been difficult to navigate in our relationship. But also, I still do believe his business ideas were good ideas. Well, I think it makes sense to write software to help career coaches. And also, not every career coach is going to be patient enough to navigate software that is not specifically designed to resemble what they're already familiar with. And I have wondered about what structures would make this more likely. My mom is a licensed counselor, and designing something for coaches can be relevant for someone who counsels. So it has been strange. Both of my parents have businesses, and I've been working towards describing that I'm aware of that and have been designing software specifically for that. And when that software wasn't received, I've also been having conversations with people who would benefit from their services and maintaining relationships with people who want their services. Not their specific services, I guess, not from them specifically, just in general. So it's been confusing to navigate what seems like an amount of resentment from my father for not having a job when I'm doing the things that, well, yeah, my career is in his footsteps. Then I pivoted to pay more attention to my mom's career, and she believes that it would be a conflict of interest to put, I don't know. I don't know. It's been frustrating to navigate. So I've been developing skills like my major was learning and education studies with a concentration in applied learning science. And I've gotten pretty good at marketing. Hire me for marketing. Cheers. I'm a software engineer and I've had some pretty difficult clients, and I go live and I make art. I don't necessarily make art when I go live. I usually read something or talk about RPG Wednesday or build code, build software. You can hire me for marketing, and the way that works is I talk about the art that I make, and it's interesting. And I know it's interesting because I've tested it. And I also know how to make art that's interesting enough for people to wonder about. And I can point to my website, and when people visit my website and wander through a process, they can stumble across something that you want to market. My 15-year career has given me enough experience that I know which kind of data people don't mind navigating. How do I say that? I know how to measure the effects of the things that I do, so I can make an advertisement that is relevant for your business. Having a website at all is a leg up. A lot of people don't have a website, and that doesn't necessarily convey a consolidated and navigable brand if they don't have one. Having a website makes it easier to communicate that you have a brand that is worth describing, and people can navigate your website and find things at their own pace. Describing how websites work. Cheers. If we've been mutuals for a few years and you know that I build websites, why don't you have one yet? You know you can hire me. Why haven't you? Cheers. You can visit my website and see the copy is not very human. I didn't write the copy. It kind of sounds like AI. Maybe if you visit it, I will have done something to improve the markup. And if you visit it and, well, I don't know. I don't know when you're going to see this video, and I might have already hired someone to help me with the copy. Maybe AI has gotten better, and by the time you visit my website, it'll read like something you want to continue reading. My goal is to make my website crawlable so you can ask a language model to summarize it and turn it into something that you would actually want to progress through. But if we don't have a reason to hire people who care about language, then some of those dimensions will just stop being culturally relevant. As a software engineer, I want a future to exist, and we need to build that future, so I'm incentivizing people to hire authors. I was on the speech team all 4 years of high school, and on the speech team, I needed to write original comedies. These were 8-minute scripts that I performed as a one-man play every Saturday throughout the speech season. So I know I can produce language that people can progress through or find entertaining, but also we need to hire other people. I can describe that I can build websites and update a website and have a reason for people to visit every week. You already know that. You can visit my website and read what's on my website. You can click around and find some things frustrating and know that they're going to improve. Knowing that a website is going to improve is a reason for people to revisit it. Hire me for marketing. Cheers.